I didn't realize at first that he was gone. That's the strange part about ghosting. There's no clear ending. No final sentence, no moment where the story stops. It just thins out. Messages become shorter, replies take longer. The rhythm changes so subtly that you keep adjusting your expectations instead of questioning the absence. I told myself he was busy, distracted, tired. I didn't want to believe that someone could disappear from my life without saying a single word. At the beginning, there was no reason to doubt anything. Our conversations flowed easily. Not intensely, not obsessively, just consistently. He remembered small details, asked questions, showed interest in my thoughts, not just my stories. That mattered to me. I wasn't looking for fireworks. I wanted continuity, emotional presence, something that felt stable enough to build on slowly. And then, without warning, that presence began to dissolve. It didn't happen all at once. One day, he took a little longer to respond. Another day, he skipped a conversation entirely. There was no explanation, no conflict, no visible shift I could point to. Just a growing silence that felt too deliberate to be accidental, but too quiet to confront directly. I didn't want to seem needy. I didn't want to create a problem where there wasn't one, so I waited. Waiting became my new routine. I checked my phone more often than I wanted to admit. Not obsessively, but enough to notice the pattern. Enough to feel the absence settle into my body. Every notification that wasn't him felt heavier than it should have. I told myself this was temporary, that people don't just vanish, that adults communicate. I believed that logic would eventually catch up to the situation. It didn't. As the silence stretched, something inside me shifted. I began replaying our last conversations, searching for clues. I reread messages, not for nostalgia, but for evidence. Had I said something wrong? Had I misunderstood the tone? Was there a moment I missed where everything changed? The more I searched, the more uncertain I became. Not because the answers were hidden, but because I had started doubting my ability to read reality accurately. That was the first real psychological impact. Ghosting doesn't just remove the other person, it removes context. And without context, the mind fills in the gaps in ways that are rarely kind. I started questioning my own memory, my own perception. I wondered if I had imagined the connection. If I had read too much into something that was never real to begin with, I felt embarrassed for caring. What made it worse was the absence of conflict. There was nothing to be angry about, no argument to process, no betrayal to confront. Just emptiness. And emptiness is harder to grieve than loss because there's nothing solid to hold on to. You can't mourn what technically never ended. I tried reaching out once. Not confrontational, not emotional, just a simple message. It went unanswered. That silence carried more weight than any rejection ever could. It wasn't just a lack of response. It was a statement, one that said my presence no longer required acknowledgement. That's when the self-questioning intensified. I began shrinking internally, not visibly, but psychologically. I stopped trusting my instincts about people. I became hyper-aware of how much I was giving emotionally, afraid of misjudging again. I told myself I was becoming more cautious, but underneath that caution was fear. Fear of being invisible. Fear of investing in something that could vanish without explanation. The most destabilizing part wasn't missing him. It was losing my sense of emotional footing. I found myself hesitant to feel too much too soon. I questioned my reactions, my expectations, my emotional needs. I wondered if wanting consistency was unrealistic, if expecting communication was asking for too much. Ghosting has a way of reframing your standards until you no longer recognize them. Time passed, but the lack of closure lingered. Friends told me to move on, to forget him, to stop overthinking. But it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the unanswered questions that had settled into my nervous system. The story felt incomplete, and my mind kept returning to it, not out of attachment, but out of confusion. I noticed how it affected my sleep, my concentration, my mood. Not dramatically, but persistently. A low-level anxiety hummed beneath my daily life. I became more alert, more guarded. I told myself I was fine, but something in me felt unsettled, like a door left open in the middle of winter. The realization didn't come suddenly. It arrived quietly, almost accidentally. One day, I caught myself waiting for a message that I no longer wanted. Not because I missed him, but because my mind had been conditioned to expect resolution from his return. And in that moment, something clicked. I understood that his disappearance had given him an importance he never actually earned. The absence had done the work. I began to see how ghosting creates a power imbalance without intention or effort. By leaving without explanation, he had avoided accountability, but he had also surrendered relevance. The control I felt he had over my emotions wasn't coming from his actions. It was coming from my unanswered questions. Once I recognized that, the weight shifted. I stopped searching my memory for mistakes. I stopped imagining conversations that would never happen. I allowed the story to remain unfinished without trying to fix it, and something unexpected happened. The silence lost its grip. Not because I got answers, but because I stopped needing them. That was the real ending. Ghosting doesn't damage mental health because someone leaves. It damages it because it teaches the nervous system to doubt reality, to fear connection, to crave closure from people who have already opted out of responsibility. And healing didn't come from understanding his reasons. It came from understanding that his disappearance was not a reflection of my worth, but of his capacity. What changed me wasn't his absence. It was the moment I realized that someone who disappears without explanation doesn't get to define the meaning of the connection they left behind. Once I saw that clearly, the silence became irrelevant. What remained was clarity. You can download the ebook in the description. The link is in the description.